Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a deeply complex and, frankly, highly sensitive period in history. We're going to examine a meticulous forensic dossier that investigates the civilian administration of Amritsar during 1984, specifically right around Operation Blue Star and its aftermath. Now, rather than focusing on the military tactics or the gun battles that usually dominate these historical discussions, this source material takes a completely different, almost structural approach. It asks a crucial question: what exactly was the civilian government doing? So we're going to look strictly at the administrative paperwork, the statutory duties of the local magistrates, and the documented bureaucratic reality of that time.
Here is the forensic arc of our explainer today. We'll be moving through 6 parts. 1. The bureaucracy of a massacre. 2. Trapping the June pilgrims. 3. Atrocities and unrecorded deaths. 4. The administrator's silence. 5. The architecture of impunity. And finally, 6. The missing statutory audit. This gives us a structured review of the dossier's core profound argument that state massacres don't just require military force, they require absolute bureaucratic complicity.
To navigate this history accurately and neutrally, the source uses a really strict evidentiary framework. It grades every single claim. Proved findings are your rock-solid court judgments and official records. Documented allegations come from human rights reports and witness testimony. Analytical inferences are structural arguments based on those records, and panthic memory relies on the community's oral record. We're going to examine this historical case file today strictly through these exact evidentiary rules.
Section 1. The bureaucracy of a massacre.
To really understand what happened in Amritsar in June 1984, we have to look at the civilian and administrative foundation that was required and ultimately circumvented to deploy military force. The dossier presents a chilling central thesis. It reads, "A massacre requires soldiers. An official massacre requires paperwork. The paperwork in Amritsar was produced, or more precisely, withheld." The focus of this investigation, remember, is not the soldiers. It's the statutory failures of the district magistrate's office. Under Indian law, a civilian magistrate must authorize and document military action in a civilian area. This explainer is all about what happens when that statutory machinery deliberately fails to engage.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how the normal laws were completely sidestepped. Typically, Sections 130 and 131 of the Code of Criminal Procedure require the local magistrate to formally requisition the armed forces. It's the ultimate safeguard against military overreach. But in 1984, the reality was entirely different. The requisition for Operation Blue Star was issued directly from the State Secretariat in Chandigarh, entirely bypassing the local Amritsar district magistracy. The local administrative veto, the officer closest to the ground who was supposed to protect the civilians, was essentially neutralized right before the operation even began.
Section 2. Trapping the June pilgrims. Let's walk through this timeline because it shows how the dossier argues the civil administration's curfew management basically created a devastating trap. By June 1st, an absolute curfew was in place. But then, on the morning of June 3rd, the civil authorities suddenly relaxed the curfew, specifically to allow pilgrims to enter the complex for the Shahidi Gurupurb, which is the sacred martyrdom anniversary of Guru Arjan Dev Ji. Thousands of totally innocent pilgrims entered, and then, by the evening of June 3rd, that absolute curfew was locked right back into place, and all outbound transport was abruptly halted. Thousands of pilgrims were trapped in an active military theater by a civilian administrative order. Now, you might be wondering, were these trapped civilians warned? Well, the source cites a definitive 2017 judicial ruling to answer that. It states, "There is no written record of any public announcement by civil authorities requesting people to come out. The civil administration had the absolute authority to issue protective notifications. In fact, they had the legal obligation to do so. Yet, the official judicial record confirms that literally no documented civil warning was given to those thousands of trapped civilians." Moving into Section 3, Atrocities and Unrecorded Deaths.
55. According to the documented testimony in the dossier, this is the exact number of unarmed men who died over a single June night in a locked hostel room. Listen, they didn't die in crossfire. They died of severe dehydration, heat exhaustion, and suffocation in an unventilated room because the door was locked by soldiers and they were flat out refused water. These 55 deaths are nowhere to be found in the government's official combat casualty count. They simply vanished from the official paperwork.
And the dossier compiles even more devastating evidence. These are documented allegations and proved forensic findings. We have post-mortem reports showing prisoners executed at point-blank range with their hands bound behind their backs by their own turbans. We have documented reports of women subjected to sexual violence with absolutely zero resulting medical or police documentation. Medical facility sources reported over 15 to 20 children killed, including a 2-month-old infant. And perhaps most shockingly, military memoirs confirm that municipal workers were actually paid with the looted belongings of the dead just to clear the bodies. So the crucial point is this. Every single one of these atrocities represents a massive, legally mandated failure of civil documentation by the district magistrate's office.
72. This represents the number of hours bodies were left out to decompose in the punishing June heat before any postmortems were conducted. From a forensic standpoint, as the dossier argues, this is definitely not a logistical error. It is the fingerprint of deliberate administrative delay. 72 hours of decomposition completely destroys crucial forensic evidence, things like ligature marks and close-range gunshot wounds. This delay essentially ensured that the true manner of these deaths could never be officially proven. Section 4. The Administrator's Silence. Think about the legal mandate versus the actual reality here, because the contrast is stark. Under Indian law, Sections 174 and 176 of the CRPC explicitly mandate that the executive magistrate must order inquiries, conduct inquests, and issue death certificates for any unnatural death or death in custody. But the documented reality of Amritsar in 1984, 0 inquests were ordered, 0 death certificates were issued. Instead, bodies were transported in municipal garbage trucks and cremated en masse. The source makes a powerful argument here. This administrative silence, the very act of deliberately not ordering inquests, was the primary weapon used to cover up the scale of the atrocities. Now, to deflect responsibility, the Deputy Commissioner's office often pointed to a subordinate police officer, DSP Apar Singh Bajwa. Bajwa morally stepped in to negotiate Sikh religious rights for just 4 bodies. Meanwhile, over 800 other bodies were cremated en masse without any rights or identification. The dossier summarizes this deflection perfectly with this quote: Apar Singh Bajwa carried the bodies. Ramesh Inder Singh carried the office. The Republic rewarded the office. A subordinate doing the right thing in a complete administrative vacuum does not excuse the magistrate who created that vacuum in the first place. Section 5. The Architecture of Impunity. Let's track the career arc of DC Ramesh Inder Singh, exactly as laid out in the dossier. He became Deputy Commissioner in June 1984, right as the operation began. From 1984 to 1987, his office oversaw the administrative silence regarding thousands of unrecorded deaths and illegal mass detentions during Operation Woodrose. So, how did the state evaluate his performance? Well, in 1986, he was awarded the Padma Shri, which is one of India's highest civilian honors, for contributions to public administration. Decades later, in 2009, he was appointed Chief Information Commissioner of Punjab. They literally put the man responsible for the missing 1984 records in charge of the public's right to access government records. The system structurally elevated the official who oversaw the silence.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is this specific number, 2,097. This isn't an estimate or a guess. This is the exact number of illegal, unrecorded mass cremations that the Central Bureau of Investigation eventually identified in this specific district. It completely cements the absolute staggering scale of the paperwork failure. The administration didn't just misplace a few files. They systematically allowed over 2,000 citizens to be turned to ash without a single trace of legal documentation.
Which brings us to our final part. Section 6. The Missing Statutory Audit. Here is the statutory demand list. The dossier is publicly demanding these specific missing documents: Section 174 and 176 inquest reports, death certificates for the victims, individualized legal grounds for the thousands of young men detained under the National Security Act, records of lockup inspections, and any communications from the magistrate to the military demanding accountability. The source strongly emphasizes that the very absence of these documents is an undeniable administrative fact. They were required by law to exist, and they just don't. I'll read this haunting conclusion directly from the source material. The district had a magistrate. The dead had none. Just let the sheer weight of that administrative betrayal settle for a moment. The state apparatus meant to protect citizens and document their existence completely renounced its duties. Which leaves us with this final, provocative question. When a state's machinery burns the bodies and deliberately destroys the files, what does the absence of records mean for the history we are allowed to remember? Is the truth lost, or does the deliberate absence of a record become the most damning historical record of all? Thank you for joining me in this explainer. Keep asking questions and keep looking closely at the structure of the information and the silence around you.